I remember the exact morning everything cracked open. I was sitting on the edge of my bed, just staring at the floor, carrying that quiet weight that had become my constant companion. It wasn't some big dramatic breakdown. It was a slow, creeping recognition that I had been playing the game wrong for years. The world is not a fair arena. It never was. 5 centuries ago, Niccolò Machiavelli looked at that truth without flinching. He watched the courts of Florence up close, the loyalty that vanished the moment it became inconvenient, the generosity that invited betrayal, the good men who stayed good and stayed powerless. He didn't sugarcoat it. He said, "A man who insists on being good in a world where others are not will ruin himself." That line hit me differently once I had lived it. Because I had lived it. For years, I had been the reliable one, the endlessly available one, the guy who quietly burned through his own resources just to keep everyone else comfortable. I told myself it was integrity. It was weakness. And the world, exactly as Machiavelli predicted, responded to that weakness by taking more. That morning, on the edge of the bed, was the end of that version of me.
Here's something almost no one tells you plainly. Your calm is a resource, and it has real enemies. Not loud, dramatic ones. The attack is quiet, industrial, and almost invisible because it's been completely normalized. Think about what actually happens the second your eyes open. Before your feet even touch the floor, you're already processing someone else's agenda, a notification, a headline designed to spike your stress, a feed built on the exact psychology that comparison and mild anxiety keep you scrolling. By the time you're actually awake, your first hour has already been harvested. Machiavelli understood these mechanics long before smartphones existed. He wrote that whoever controls the narrative controls the people inside it. And the narrative they're feeding all of us is simple. Your worth is external. Your peace must be earned through approval. Your happiness depends on metrics set by other people. It's a story designed to keep you looking outward, so you never turn inward and discover the real power that's been there all along. I spent years waking up already drained. Long conversations with people who never changed. Favors that felt mandatory but left me hollow. The constant background hum of performing for an audience that wouldn't cross the street for me. I told myself this was just being a decent person. What I was really doing was running a slow leak on everything I had. The distracted man is the manageable man. That's not conspiracy, that's power psychology. And it's been true in every single era. Keep him reactive, he makes weak decisions. Keep him comparing himself to others, he creates nothing. Keep him emotionally exposed, he can be read like an open book. The day I finally saw this clearly, I stopped reacting. I became the watcher. And a man who cannot be pulled off course cannot be beaten.
There's a moment most men feel, but few ever name. It usually comes on a quiet evening, at the end of another day where you poured out your hours, your loyalty, your focus. And when you finally do the honest math, you realize almost nothing came back. You feel it in your chest before the words even form. Most men brush right past it. They convince themselves that if they just give a little more, wait a little longer, make themselves a little smaller, eventually it will be noticed and rewarded. It never is. The pattern repeats, the exhaustion deepens, and that quiet ache becomes something they simply learn to live with. Here is the hard truth Machiavelli embedded in every page he wrote. People do not treasure what it costs them nothing to access. They value what is rare. They respect limits. The man who can look you in the eye and communicate without saying a single word that his time and his peace are not up for discussion, that man gets treated differently. Not because he is cruel, because he has finally made himself legible in the only language the world actually understands. The day you stop being available to everyone is the day you start mattering to the right people. My own moment came on a random Tuesday night, sitting alone in my car in the dark, exhaustion sitting heavy in my chest. I finally named what had been happening for years. I had been giving away the very thing Machiavelli called virtù, that vital personal force, that inner energy and sharpness that makes a man capable of anything, and I had been handing it to people and situations that didn't even know what to do with it. That was my decision point. Choosing myself wasn't selfishness. It was the structural first move every lasting thing is built on. Once that choice was made, the practice became crystal clear. I had to guard my calm the way a ruler guards the most critical position in his territory. Machiavelli was direct about this. A fortress is only valuable if you actually defend it. Leaving the gates open out of politeness isn't generosity. It's an open invitation to everything that wants to take from you. I started treating my mornings like sovereign ground. The first hour belonged to me, to thought, to direction, to myself, not to anyone else's emergency or algorithm. I became genuinely selective about who got access to my time and my inner life. Not cold, strategic. I started asking a different question about every person and every commitment. Does this add to my foundation or slowly erode it? For years, I had been emotionally open by default, saying yes when everything inside me screamed no, absorbing problems that weren't mine to carry, leaving every door wide open because I was terrified of being called selfish. What I finally understood is that endless availability isn't virtue. It's a kind of slow self-betrayal that wears the mask of kindness. The Stoics and Machiavelli arrived at the same insight from different paths. Emotions are information, not performance. Feel the anger, examine the hurt, turn the frustration into fuel, but do the processing in private and step back into the world composed. The man who displays every emotional reaction in real time is handing others a complete manual on how to control him. The man who feels everything but reveals only what serves him becomes unreadable, and the unreadable man holds the room.
Machiavelli spent years in forced exile after his entire political world collapsed. Stripped of power, watched by enemies, he could have drowned in bitterness or desperately chased the people who had cast him out. Instead, he sat in the silence. He read, he thought, he observed the full machinery of power with the kind of clarity that only distance can give. That period didn't break him, it built him. I thought about that a lot during the time I started pulling back from the noise. The crowd always tries to drag you back in. Silence makes them uncomfortable because it forces them to face how little real substance their constant motion actually contains. But I was becoming something different in the quiet. Solitude wasn't absence, it was a forge. In that space, I finally saw my real goals without the distortion of other people's expectations. I saw the habits that had been quietly costing me more than they ever returned. I felt my discipline turn from something I performed into something real. Every morning, I woke up with direction that came from inside me, not borrowed urgency from the outside world. I stopped shrinking my ambitions to fit inside someone else's comfort zone. I stopped filling the silence with noise just to avoid the discomfort of honest self-examination. The man who has learned to be alone without being lonely is genuinely dangerous because he needs nothing from the crowd. And when you need nothing, you can't be leveraged. Now came the building phase. Everything I had learned, choosing myself first, guarding my calm, reclaiming my solitude, mastering my energy and emotional expression, none of it would last unless I anchored it in something solid, a clear identity, standards that didn't bend under pressure, a sense of self that no longer depended on outside validation to stay standing. Machiavelli understood that the prince who rules by the fear of others will always be fragile because his stability comes from outside him. But the man who rules from internal clarity, who knows exactly who he is, what he will accept, and what he will never tolerate, becomes stable in a way no external force can easily touch. I built that stability deliberately. Not the identity handed down by family expectations or social performance, but the one I had tested in the fire and chosen for myself. When I finally knew who I was at that level, other people's opinions of me became interesting at most and irrelevant at worst. I stopped over-explaining myself to people who had already made up their minds. I walked away from conversations designed to destabilize rather than connect. Every betrayal, every failure, every time someone counted me out and I had to rebuild, I stopped treating those moments as wounds to nurse. I started treating them the way Machiavelli treated his exile, as the raw material for something stronger. The man who has been through the fire, faced it honestly, and emerged with more clarity than before, is the most formidable kind. Not because he's hard, because he's been tested and he knows it. This became my new operating mode. Not loud, not as a performance, just as a quiet, stable, daily reality. I woke up and moved through my days with purpose that came from inside. My focus held. My calm stayed protected. I was no longer at the mercy of everything around me. I chose myself. I guarded my peace. I walked alone when it was required. I took control of my energy and my expression. And the rise that followed wasn't loud or dramatic. It was simply the natural result of a man who finally stopped working against himself. Not someday. Starting the morning I sat on the edge of that bed and finally told myself the truth. If this reached something real inside you, type "I choose myself first" in the comments right now. Then go build something that lasts. You've got this. Now go dominate every single day.